Hey everyone, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. So, am I audible? So, my name is Karthik. I'll be hosting this demo session and as well as the entire course for you. So, you can post anything that you might have wanted to ask in the questions on the chat window below. If I'm audible, please post that. Thank you. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes, all right? Let's give some time for people to come. I think there are quite a few people yet to join this webinar. We'll give some time. We'll be starting in 2-3 minutes. Okay, my screen is visible, right? So for now, I'll be centrally muting all of you people, right? If you want anything, you can raise these things in the chat window. Otherwise, uh, you can ask the chat window. If you want to unmute yourself, I'll unmute everyone and probably we can speak towards the end of the session if you want. All right. Okay. So before starting this, I also wanted to know the pulse of my audience also, right? How many of you are from testing background here? Can you please post it? I think instead of raising the hands, you can post in the chat window. I guess. Testing. Okay. 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 Great. And how many of you have prior experience in development? Anything, be it Java, Ruby, Python, whatever, or have previously worked in development? Anyone? Okay. Automation development experience. Okay. 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 So as far as I see, only one person has this development experience. So, and someone says like, is anyone speaking? I'm not able to hear from my end. I hope other people are not running into this issue. Any other person facing this issue? Himanshu says he's not able to hear. Hope not. Okay, we'll start. So to give a quick summary about myself, my name is Karthik. I am working in a company based out of Chennai called Freshworks. It is a product-based company, okay, which was started in 2010. And we sell SaaS products. SaaS is software as a service products to other business. Obviously, so we have to create and manage software and infrastructure, everything from our end. So my role currently in my company is I'm a Java backend developer. Right? We primarily work on Spring and Spring Boot kind of projects. And we also think of how to scale all these things to cater to multiple users or customers, whatever. Okay. So that is my background. And since most of you have said you people are here from testing background, so the purpose and intention of this course is also to start from the basic level of what is a development, right? I hope few people, I'm sure like a few people have mentioned they are from manual testing background. Um, it might be a little hard to catch up once I go into the core Spring kind of theories. So I would suggest you to learn a little bit of Java to and OOPS concept in parallelly. I think way to automation. I mean, they are also conducting some core Java sessions also. I guess, right? If possible, please enroll in that also. And speaking of which, so the agenda is to come from the basics, from the client server architecture, why there is a need of basic server kind of things, and how databases are configured, and very basics of the Spring. What is a Spring MVC? What is a Spring Boot? What are how objects are managed? What is dependency injection, inversion of control, Spring AOP? I totally get it. If you don't get all these new names or technologies or jargons, I totally get it. We'll see one by one, right? So until so the agenda goes like this: until we are able to develop our own basic CRUD. What's a CRUD? Create, read, update, delete. Right? We are able to do the basic CRUD operations by creating a simple apps. We'll do that, and we'll also make a small, simple, usable web page which will do some particular operations using Spring Boot. So I hope by end of this session, end of this entire course, you'll be able to get some idea, a decent idea about what it is. So let's get started with the basic thing. Tomorrow I might or might not show a demo because I don't want to start it right away, because once I download a Spring project and start it right away, it might be hard for you people to catch up. So I'll start from the basics, client server architecture. Right? Okay. So let's keep the session engaging. Please, as and when I ask questions, you can post your answers in chat window also. So can we crack the interview by the end of this course? It's totally up to you how much you are hardworking and getting into it. Personally, if you follow this, I would suggest if you follow this and instead of just listening to this session, if you are able to, by the end of the session, whatever I say, if you're able to do and create your own projects and start writing the code on your own, I'm sure you'll be able to crack into it. Okay, one more question before we start. How many years of experience people have? Can you post it here? Just wanted to understand the pulse of my audience also. Okay, okay, Okay. So many people are above 5 years of experience, or so only 1% posted 1.5 years. Any new joinees or freshers? Okay, great, 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 great. Okay, we'll start. So we all know how a web application works, right? When I hit something in the browser, when I hit google.com, have someone explode. We all know, everyone of us would have ended up with google.com at one point of the time in their life. If I hit Google, some responses coming for me. Have everyone explored this tab called network tab? If you see some calls are going here, right? Have anyone of you explored this tab? Yes, while API testing. Okay, yes. So what this network tab does, whenever I hit something, this name, right? This name will be resolved. This is a DNS name, right? Domain name service. So this will be resolved against an IP. This google.co.in will be having an IP address that is related to it. It will be resolved with an IP, and that IP address might have been hosted in a server, right? In a server which is sitting in a remote. And that server, what it does, it searches for the content that we are requesting. In this case, it's a Google homepage, and it is returning back to us. So all these details you can see here in the network tab. What are the API calls that are going, and what are the responses that are coming back? Everything you can see here. See, I'll clear this tab and I click refresh one more time. If you see here, so this google.co.in is a GET request, right? So GET request, which is going to the server, and the response is 200. I hope some people are, few people are aware of this GET request. For people who doesn't know, like everything from the client to the server, it goes via something called HTTP methods. Right? Yeah, someone says source HTTP method calls, that totally correct. So it goes via this client to the server. Server is nothing but another computer sitting in the remote. Nothing. It's nothing but another computer. As simple as that. We get to keep all these informations from the other end. We don't want stored in the our end because obviously the memory is limited. So that's why everything is hosted separately, and we are able to get all these data by requesting to the server. Right? So we hit this domain, we hit this method, HTTP method called get, we get the response as 200. And if you see here, you go to preview, you get this preview, right? So this is the response that is got by the server as a HTML page itself. And why this image is broken here? Why I'm not able to see the image here? Okay, someone says, could you please unmute? Okay. Hello, Nidhi, can you hear me? I think I have unmuted you. Please, if you have any questions. Hello.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah,
Hello?
I'm able to hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Just for like, I thought if I will get any doubt, so I should ask you. That's the reason I like
Yeah,
messaged you.
sure, sure. Please.
Now
Mhm.
I'm doing like I muted myself. Once I will get doubt, I will ask you. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, okay, okay. Okay. So, like, anyone does know the answer why this image is not loaded here? Okay. At the
We
end
have
of,
not the address properly, right? It's not like in the network we used to expect it, right? It's not like network is
Mhm.
not running. That's the reason we are not getting that.
Okay, it's not that. See, once you request to a server, this HTML page will be loaded, but this image, it's an image, right? Obviously, at the end of the day, this image is loaded in the separate file, right? Just, just 1 minute. So these images and CSS files are loaded as separate files, not as the response from the server itself. See, you have to understand this client server architecture really in detail for this. See, whenever, what is a client actually? A client is the browser, right? Browser is a client, agree or not? Browser is one of the client. We say it client because the client is something which is going to display the information that is got as response from the server, right? Browser is a client. What else can be called as a client? What about Postman? Have you heard of this tool called Postman? I think I have opened it here. What is a Postman?
I need a tool where we are hitting the
So
endpoint you are for getting the response.
Postman is a tool which is used to send and receive API requests. Right? Browser is capable of doing only GET requests, whereas Postman is
Get
capable of doing all the other HTTP requests.
yes, yes, yes.
Right? Okay. So Postman also can be called as a client. So what else can be called as a client? What about your mobile?
So PI also we can call as a
Yes, yes,
what to say
yes.
client.
Yes, it can be called as a client.
Mm.
What about your mobile apps? Can it be called as a client? Let's say, let's take an example of WhatsApp. Can it be called as a client?
Yeah, we can say.
Yes, because it is again requesting data from the server to load your chats.
Yeah.
Yes, ATM machine. Someone has said yes, rightly. ATM machine is a client, right? So there can be multiple clients which will help you display multiple kind of informations. Because if you see this Postman, it's only a request and response, right? The layout, the convention is totally different from a browser, which is going to display the web pages for you. Whereas someone said ATM machine, yes, absolutely. ATM machine is a standalone software which will communicate to the server. It's a client. It's a computer which loads the client software. That software is responsible for communicating to the server to send or receive money. Right? That's also type of client. So client is anything that is used to communicate to the server. That's the basic understanding we have to keep about the client. Right? Server, not only it's able to communicate the server, but through HTTP protocol. Right? So that is what we call as client. You see here, there are certain protocols which you can trigger using your browser itself. Everyone knows this, right? HTTP and HTTPS, the difference. The HTTP hypertext text transfer protocol. What is this S at the end of the HTTP? Why in most of the websites you see are HTTPS and not HTTP?
And that is secure actually. STPP is not a secure. STPPS is kind of secure, like security in like SSL is there, right? We are taking a validation for the client. Like suppose that if we want to provide any certification kind of things in that scenario, STPPS is secure and STPP is not.
Okay, someone was saying. Okay. Someone was saying this is not a school class. Better you speak and doubt than I understand. You communicate and not understand. You I'm not getting what you're trying to say, Tushar. Maybe. Nidhi, I'll take the session and if like we'll take the questions maybe at the end of an hour or so. Maybe you can post your answers in the chat window. Okay. Okay. So yes, you can. Everyone can post the. I expect you people to be professional about the things you post in the chat window. I hope we are all professionals and let's not try to be a bully. Okay. So there are a certain protocol called HTTP and HTTPS through which application can communicate and get the data from the server. There is also this protocol called FTP. I hope many of you would have studied in school and college days, right? What's an FTP? File transfer protocol. You all know that. But can I hit an FTP like this from the server? See, it might not work because it's not a proper FTP protocol. Can I do something like this? That's the question. Something like this FTP and say any uh, IP address or what or so. Can I do something like this? Okay, it is possible, right? It is possible to do something like this. FTP protocol is also supported by the browser, right? Like HTTP and HTTPS. FTP is also supported by the browser. Right? We have to understand that. So one difference between HTTP and HTTPS is HTTP is not secured, right? Since it doesn't have any SSL encryption, so it is not secured. Many people can, if they are in this particular network or in the right traffic, they can read read this HTTP request. Right? We have to understand this basic first. HTTP, it's not secure. Right? So any person can intercept that HTTP request and they can read the information which we send from the client to server, which we don't want. Right? This is an unwanted scenario. But whereas in HTTPS, it is not possible because the content which is sent from the client to server is secure, it's encrypted using SSL encryption. And for that, you have to buy an SSL certificate and have to install in your server. And always remember, these are, I mean, I'm saying all these things because these are important on the way while you are creating an web application using Spring Boot, all right? HTTP always reads in the port called 80. HTTPS always reads in the port called 443. What is a computer port? I also wanted to from. We say it's an 80 port, it's a 443 port. What are these? What's a computer port? Okay, someone was asking if you say HTTPS secure, what exactly we mean by secure? Security, nothing like, see, for example, what kind of informations are sent from client to a server? Can you give me some examples? Let's say I wanted to log in into my application, right? Let's say I'm using a Facebook. I wanted to log into my application. Facebook login page is there. I'm typing my username and password. This username and password should be validated somewhere and say, hey, it's the correct username and password. This is an authenticated user. So you can let him show his home page where these things are decided. Yes. So someone was saying port is nothing but a computer hardware entry gate where the service is running and served to the client. Yes, it's not, it's to the point, some 80% it's correct, but it's not completely hardware. It is also managed by software, OS kernel, which also manages these ports. Right? So coming back to this question, we type username and password in the respective fields in the client, in the browser, in the respective Facebook login page. How it is able to send all this information somewhere and validate, validation happens, where these things are happening. So username and password validations, where these things are happening. This happening in the server, right? Correct. Yes, someone says server side. Yes, it's not. Yes, it's someone says DB. We store some informations in the DB. Yes, correct. We might store username and password in an encrypted manner in the DB. But the validation itself is happening in the server side. For that, my username and password have to travel through this network by passing these OSI layers. We have studied these OSI layers. What are the 7 layers of OSI? Transport layer, network layer. There are some ISO OSI model, right? Like I think we have all studied these basic things, I guess. So when I'm saying HTTP, the details are not encrypted. Means what? The details are raw. It is ended as it is. So anyone who is available in the particular network is able to read this data, provided he's, for example, I'm hitting this Facebook login UI page, and if the particular and this particular DNS is going to be resolved against an IP address. Right? What if a particular Linux user is able to ping this IP address in his terminal and is able to get all these details? What is the security there? Right? You don't encrypt all these details in the client end. The HTTP protocol takes the care of that, provided that we say that is HTTPS and not HTTP. Right? When I say HTTPS, same Facebook login page example, I give username and password. Understand that the client, that is what browser is not going to encrypt your particular username and password. Encryption means what? It is going to convert your username and password into some other unreadable format. Not going to be done by your client or browser. It's going to be done at the protocol transport level there or at the server side, where you are going to redirect all the traffic from HTTP to HTTPS. So it's a secure way of doing that. It's a way of authorizing, hey, this is a secured, non-readable, encrypted data that is coming to the server. I cannot read, anyone who is in the network cannot read this particular thing. That is called HTTPS. Right? So we saw what is HTTP, HTTPS. Then I also said about the FTP protocol can be hitted like this, right? Then what's an FTP then? Okay. So FTP is something. Have you heard of? Okay. Have you heard of this term called CDN, Content Delivery Network? Anyone? I used to quote this example in the multiple sessions which I take. See, we are all watching this Amazon Prime and Netflix, right? Netflix is a US company. It's one of the FANG companies. We all know, right? What are the FANG companies? FAANG. It's Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google, right? It's one of the FANG. It's the top companies, top revenue generating top tech companies to work for. So Netflix is a US based company which has majority of US television shows, and how it is able to serve to the people around the world. How it is able to do. For example, I'm watching some movie in Netflix. Let's say I'm watching a movie called ABC Netflix. Where are these details stored? Where this movie is stored actually? Any idea? I hope I'm not boring you people. Dark web. Okay. I don't know whether that was a serious answer or funny answer. See, I'm question not clear. See, I'm having some movie Netflix, right? Movies, TV shows, whatever, right? Where these movies are stored actually. It has to be stored in some area or some place, some hard disk, so that that particular movie is served when I request for that in my browser. Agree or not? It is stored in the cloud. Someone said it correct. It's stored in the exactly cloud server. So one of the cloud server we call it as CDN. The CDN is a special cloud. CDN is Content Delivery Network. CDN is a special kind of cloud which hosts only your binary files. What are binary files? Binary files are something which are like your images, photos, or videos, or this movies kind of things, or what. So whenever I'm requesting these files, it is going to come not as an HTTP. Obviously, nowadays there are different technologies to make it as HTTP request. Let's say it's not an HTTP request; it's going to be a file transfer protocol to the HTTP request that is passed from the browser to the CDN, and in turn, the CDN understands this FTP request. Hey, this particular person is requesting for this resource only, and it is able to send that resource from that storage area, like CDN, back to our browser for these FTP is used. FTP is used to transfer large files. The throughput is totally depend upon uh, the kind of capacity your server has, the internet connectivity, and kind of capacity your client has, your computer has. It just has nothing to do with the protocol itself. So those are the content delivery networks. So understand that a server is different and CDNs are different. What is a server? Server is a machine which is sitting in remote, right? There are two main areas in India where these servers are there. One is in Mumbai and another one is in Bangalore. Many cloud providers are there nowadays which provide these remote machines and act as a server, and most of them keep their servers in Mumbai or Bangalore. Even Netflix has its one of its server in Mumbai. Let's say I'm requesting a movie from Netflix and it will hit this Mumbai server. It will not go to the US server. Understand that? It understand from which region the request is originating, right? And it will hit this particular request to the server in Mumbai. But I'm also receiving the content back, this movie content or whatever, back from the Netflix servers, right? That's movie content will not be from Mumbai. So that is the key point to understand. So understand that this Netflix has the server in Mumbai. Let's say I'm sitting in, let's say I'm sitting in Chennai. Okay, I'm sitting in Chennai. I'm hitting this Netflix homepage. And what will happen? This request will go to this server, which is present in Mumbai, and it will find the content available, whether this content he is requesting is valid content or not. If it is valid content and it is an authorized user, it will get that content from this CDN and it will give back to you. Understand that the server is only in Mumbai, but the CDN can be anywhere around you. It can be just 30 kilometers away from you. Right? Nowadays, most of these people are partnership with the CDN providers, which is in and around you. For example, Chennai might have 7 or 8 CDN locations. Even small tier 2 cities in your state might have 2 or 3 CDN locations. So what will happen? This particular server in Mumbai will find where you are, with your IP address, it will find your location, and it will redirect this entire traffic to this CDN, which is located very near to you. And this, the movie which is requested by you will be served by this CDN only, right? Not from the Mumbai server. So that is the first point we need to understand while understanding this client server architecture. Right? The first point what we need to understand is like the protocol. It is either communicating through HTTP or HTTPS or FTP, and all these things are going to. Second thing, what we want to understand is like all these things are going to go to a server. The server, most probably here in India, will be present in Mumbai or Bangalore. In different countries, it might be in different locations. And the second important thing, what we understand is this server. All the requests which are coming from this client will go to this server. Request originating from client will go to the server. And third most thing, what we wanted to understand is the CDN. So this traffic is rerouted from server to CDN. So coming back to the original question, which we was FTP is also encrypted as HTTPS. Yes, it is. It has some encryption mechanisms also, which we'll be talking about in later while we developing all these Spring Boot applications. Right? So coming back to this original question, why this image is not loaded in this HTTP request? Why? Now can anyone answer why? Anyone? We see this. This is the image, right? Google image, which is not there in the original request because this image itself is coming from a different server like Syrian, right? Yes, exactly. So someone was asking, it means CDN provides the data to client. Yes, exactly. CDN only provides the data like movies and images to the client, not JSON or XML content. Those JSON or XML are originating from the server itself, whereas the binary data like movies, videos, TV shows, everything is originating from the CDN. Image may not be absent on local CDN server. Okay, if the image is not present in the server, if, the server is most likely to find where this particular request you are locating in and try to get that to you. And it is also going to put this image back to the CDN server if phone is not there. See, these binary files like images are served from in a different manner, right? It's not exactly like it's going to be an FTP request and all. We'll talk about that because this might be hosted in a CDN, and the CDN is also kind of server. As I said, you CDN is a special kind of server which hosts this binary file like movies and images. You see this particular URL. Every server has to resolve to a DNS and IP address. Agree or not? So this particular CDN also has this DNS of google.co.in, and where is but in this particular endpoint images slash branding slash Google logo, if the particular server sees this endpoint, it knows where it has to redirect and slash 2x slash this image.png. If you see this, the endpoint itself has this .png. That means what? We are most likely to receive this particular image from the CDN server only. So understand the CDN is kind of a storage area. It's kind of FTP file transport to the storage area. Yes. Sir. So it is we are able to directly request that resource by hitting the corresponding endpoint itself. That's the thing which I wanted to emphasize. Someone was asking, every CDN has all files or data that is in the server. No, understand that server doesn't contain any data at all. Server is a computer which is sitting in remote in any area. For example, I said Mumbai. Yes, there are servers in Mumbai. So server is basically a computer which is sitting in Mumbai, which is going to process your request. That's it. And wherever, whatever data you are requesting is either going to be stored in a database like SQL databases and NoSQL databases, or in CDNs, or in a storage devices like S3. I say that. There's something called AWS. AWS, we all know. What's an AWS? What's an AWS? I think, I hope you would have heard this term at least once in your life. Amazon Web Services, right? This Amazon Web Services is a cloud provider from Amazon, which will provide you everything you want, almost everything you want, like servers, some services like storage. One of the important service which provide is called S3. S3 is a very, very famous term in AWS kind of environment. S3 is called Simple Storage Service. Right? The simple storage service is also one of the implementation. Understand, it's not an FTP, it's an implementation of an FTP protocol, which is used to store the any kind of file. For that, not only binary, it can store an XML file, JSON file, it can store a JPG file, image file, it can store an HTML file. Whatever you throw at it, it will store. So, what is the advantage of S3 is the throughput, right? If you are multiple people are requesting this multiple same resource multiple times, it is able to serve this resource seamlessly. It doesn't seem to have blocked by any of this traffic requests coming to it. It is highly scalable, highly reliable, highly available database. Right? S3, simple storage service. So only it's very, very famous. So if you are hosting your particular files in S3, automatically, if you hit that endpoint with the right authorization, if you have, that file is automatically going to be downloaded in your computer. Right? You would have seen some websites where if you click that link, any PDF file would be automatically downloaded, any image would be automatically downloaded. How those things are happening? Because you would have hit that, that client would have hit that right endpoint with the services like S3, and it is going to get the file from S3. It is going to automatically download into your computer through your web internet, and it's going to automatically do all the process for you. Right? You don't have to confuse everything now. So understand that S3 is a simple. Hello, sorry, am I audible now? Because my power went here connecting through hotspot now. Now am I audible? Okay. Sorry for that interruption. Okay. So till now, what we saw, there are requests that is originating from clients like mobile, like browser, like your Postman, like your mobile apps through one of these protocols like HTTP or HTTPS or FTP, right? And it is going to hit to a server. All the basic contents like JSON or XML or HTML is going to be sent from the server itself. And all these large files like images, videos are going to be delivered through the CDNs. Again, the server is going to redirect this traffic from CDN to your mobile. It will just say, hey, this content is in CDN. From here on, you take care. Let CDN take care. It will direct all these requests from the next request from your client to the CDN, not to the server. That is the work of the server, right? And fourth important point, what we have to understand is server itself will not contain all this data, right? All this data is either present in one of the DBs, either SQL DBs or NoSQL DBs, or as I said, you right, services like S3, which is an implementation of an FTP protocol. Now, I think many of you would have heard of what is a SQL DB. What's a typical example of a SQL DB? Can anyone say? Okay. Nidhi, I think we'll unmute you. Can you post your question in the chat window for now? Yes, someone was saying Oracle, MySQL, Postgre. Yes, everything is a SQL DB. Among the SQL DBs, MySQL and PostgreSQL are very, very famous. Let's take those examples. Right, these are very famous. Right. MySQL is again an open source version, which is developed by Oracle only. And what is a NoSQL DB? We all know this MySQL DB store data in the form of tabular column manner, right? It will be tables which rows and columns. Someone was saying NoSQL DB is MongoDB Cosmos DB. Yes, correct. One of the example is a MongoDB. If someone says like, what is a MongoDB? How it actually stores the data in which format? Okay. Okay, it's good to see many people have a good understanding of what's a NoSQL database. Also. Great. Redis, yes, Redis is one of NoSQL implementation. Mongo, it's a no structured data. Yes, great. So yes, it stores things in a different format. Someone was saying, okay, let's come to MongoDB. MongoDB is specifically stored in this format called document format, otherwise called JSON format. Right? We call in MongoDB world, we call this as a document. Otherwise, we generally say it as a JSON, right? So if a particular database is able to store this particular thing in a JSON format itself, then it's a MongoDB implementation. Someone was saying it's a Redis. Redis is a NoSQL database whose primary purpose is to store data in RAM, random access memory, not in your ROM. And it's generally like an hash map. Hash map for people who doesn't know, it's a key value pair. You have a key, which is a representation of what type of value that it is going to contain, and you have a typical value. Let's say the key is organization name and the value is data automation, something like that. So understand that Redis stores all this data in a key value format. Let's not go too much deep into what is this NoSQL database. We'll see while we are going through this course. But understand that it stores the data in an unconventional formats like this document or key value pairs and so on. And someone was mentioning this Cassandra also. Yes, it's good to know that Cassandra is one of the most widely used NoSQL database in a big tech world like Google, Facebook, and Oracle, and many big companies use Cassandra nowadays. Okay, so that is the basic understanding. Now, let's take an example of a SQL database. I hope everyone is aware of what is a SQL database. It's a table. Let's consider this an employee table, which stores an information like ID, name, and maybe email. Right? Let's assume that it is storing this data in a tabular format. Obviously, we all know, right, how it's going to serve the data. Let's say give me something like this: ID is one, name is ABC, and email is abc@gmail.com. Something like this, and so on. Right? So I am in a client like browser. I'm requesting this particular data. This employee one, I need the details of employee one. This server has to return this data by fetching from the database. Now I wanted to understand from you in what format it is going to return this data for. Can you people post it in the chat? I'm requesting a data for this employee called ABC. It's going to return its employee ID and name as well as its email, right? Now this particular, we all know this particular thing is actually stored in a table kind of format. If we go to this MySQL implementations and all, it's not exactly a table format, but while we see. Hello, I'm audible, right? Hope my audio is not in a distraction. So we all know that the data which is stored in the MySQL is in a tabular format. Right? But while requesting from the client, it's not going to return mean tabular format itself. It can be in any format. Right? What is the format? Can anyone post in the chat window? I hope I'm still audible. Hello. 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 Am I audible, right? So I think there is some distraction in the internet connection. I guess let me check my internet connection and get back to you in 2 minutes. Okay. Is my screen visible now? And I hope my audio is also available. Please post it in the chat window. Okay, great. Apologies for that internet disruptions. I don't know what happened because I was connected on. Anyway, okay. So the question which I was asking is like, see, this is a SQL database which is going to store a particular data in a SQL format, it's a tabular format. But while I'm requesting from a browser and any other client for that matter, generally in what format this data is going to be available for me? Can someone post it in the chat window? Yes, someone says JSON, absolutely right. It's a JSON. Right? Nowadays, most of the response that you see is going to be in a JSON format. Otherwise, XML formats, which is kind of outdated nowadays. Right? But most probably JSON format. JSON is very, very comfortable nowadays because of its compatibility and portability. And JavaScript by native itself is going to support JSON format. JSON is an abbreviation for JavaScript object notation. So by default, it's an kind of fun notation which is coming from the JavaScript world. And any browser that is you're going to see in the real-time world is going to handle this JSON format only, and which has inbuilt JSON support because it is a JavaScript. any browser that you see is going to handle only JavaScript kind of execution in the browser environment. So it's easy for the client to process this data. So it's going to be coming in most of the times in a JSON format, otherwise XML format. Right? But what is doing this conversion? I'm saying it is stored in the tabular format, but it's coming as a JSON format to me. Who is doing this conversion and where it's being done? Answer is simple. Can anyone try to answer that in chat window? Okay, someone says API handles this conversion to extent correct, middleware or API. But generally, yes, correct. But generally, I would say server handle these conversions. All this API and all those codes is going to be available in the server only. So next important point in the client server architecture, what we wanted to understand is like this kind of conversions from one format to the other format is going to be handled by your server only. Okay? So in this point, what we wanted to understand is like server is making these conversions, and second point is like this JSON or XML is not going to come from your CDN. Instead, it's going to directly come from your server. That is the next important point we have to understand. So we have seen this, right? These images and these videos are going to be coming from the CDNs, but also understand that everything doesn't have to be stored in a CDN. This kind of JSON or XML response that you get from the database that is going to be converted into the respective format by the server, and it is going to be served to you by the server. And this server, there should be some mechanisms to handle these conversions, right? That mechanism is called an API. Or someone said it is a middleware. It's absolutely correct. It's a middleware or an API. So this particular server, otherwise a computer, is going to contain some code, which we call it as an API, that is going to be responsible for converting this data from this tabular structure into a JSON structure and send it back to the client via HTTP requests. Right? So far so good. Or anything which you wanted to understand until now? I hope we didn't see anything too much complex and all. So yes, so until now, I hope it is fine. So next, someone was asking, server will send HTTP response. Yes, server will send HTTP response, but there is something called request body, right? Where that request body is computed or generated. It is through these APIs, which is fetching the data from the database, going to convert into this JSON format and put it into a request body. So that is what we call as a response. Okay. Another thing which we wanted to understand is client server architecture with respect to Spring is XHR. It's nothing but XML HTTP request. Let's say, again, I'm quoting the same Facebook example. You are loading your Facebook homepage after your username and password authentication, and it's taking you to your homepage. You are seeing some post, all right? Let's say you're seeing some post or meme from some Facebook pages, and you're clicking that. That particular photo will be opened, and maybe I'll show that real-time example. It's photo of Facebook. Okay, this is a kind of post. It's a sponsored. I don't want to go here. Maybe I'll take a different example. Okay, let's take this post from this maxabout.com. It's going to be about a bikes website, right? What I'm doing, I'm just clicking this particular. post, and what it does, it expands, and it is also going to display how much likes it has got, how much comments it has got, and what are the comments, right? If I click more, it's going to display the additional comments for me, right? So if you see here, I'm not reloading this entire page. Once if I click this particular thing, you see this page is getting reloaded or not. It's not getting reloaded, right? It's getting rerouted, right? Not reloaded, right? So how it is getting rerouted and how this data is able to be fetched? Let me take another example also. Okay. Let me take this example for that matter. I'm opening this particular network call. What I'm doing is like go to this etc section, clicking this something. When I click show 3 more components, it is going to generate 1 more request for me here, right? You see this payload, it's going to fetch some information, what are the comments and what are the details. Understand that in this particular photo which I have clicked and this particular comment section that it is shown, the entire page is not getting refreshed again. Instead, one particular HTTP request is triggered from the client and the response is gotten back. And this particular section of page is only replaced, right? It's not like I opened this particular image, I have clicked this view 3 more comments. This entire page is not reloading again. Only this section changes here, right? How it is possible? What makes that possible? Can anyone? I think many of the modern day websites not going to reload your pages again and again. Right? They're just going to handle all these things from the client itself. If you click any view more comments or click additional things, it's going to just trigger an API call and it's going to get back this data and it's going to replace the data in only a particular section of this particular web page which you see. Those are not microservices. Okay, microservices is a different concept. I'll come to that. Those are called Ajax. In general word, we called it as an Ajax. Ajax calls it's an asynchronous API request, which is triggered from the client to get any informations from the server, and it's only particular section of particular web page is replaced. Entire web page is not replaced. Those are called Ajax calls, or in technical terms, we call those as XML HTTP requests or XHR calls. XHR stands for XML HTTP request. These are no longer XML, but since these are coming from way back from the XML days, it has been named like the XML HTTP request, right? But it most of the times it is going to handle this JSON formats. So are we clear about this Ajax request, or we wanted to go somewhere deep into this again? Okay. Even if you're okay with it, please respond in the chat window so that I will know. So we saw this, what is an Ajax call, what's an Ajax request. The other important thing which I also wanted to touch upon the client server architecture is an authentication and authorization. Right? And again, it is very common interview question, very commonly asked interview question. What's the difference between authentication and authorization? Many people still confuse these two terms. I even have taken several interviews myself. Even I was taking 2 interviews for my company today as the same question. One of them was not able to answer. What is authentication and authorization? What is the difference between these two? Can someone post it in the chat? Okay. Um, Nidhi Pandey again wants to say something. Let me unmute her. Yes, Nidhi, please have unmuted you. Please go ahead. What do you want to do?
So if you are talking about authentication, suppose that if we are logging the Outlook, right? So
Mhm.
so far before that, before logging, we used to get some. We have to enter some credential. That will come to the authentication. If you're talking about the authorization, it means we are authorized that particular things or not. We have authorization for that or not. Like
Mhm.
double authentication will have the Outlook, right?
Okay, partially correct. I will also say a full thing what authentication authorization is. And typically, most people will give you this example. But let's say you are working in a very big computer firm, like Apple. Let's say, for example, let's say you are working as a junior level employee. You are authenticated because you are an employee of an Apple. You are authenticated to enter into the premises of an Apple company, right? They're authenticated. That's your no other people who are not an employee of Apple cannot enter into an Apple premises, the employee premises. Right? So that is called authentication. Whereas authorization is even though you're an employee of an Apple, you cannot go anywhere. There should be some special security to be for you to be able to enter into an let's say server rooms or let's CEO office or whatever. You're authenticated to enter into an Apple premises, but you are not authorized to do certain activities inside the premises. Right? So that's the difference between authentication and authorization. In tech world, what is the difference is if you're authenticated, you are able to access that website. But if you are not authorized, you will not be able to get information for a particular endpoints. I'll say what's the difference. Uh, okay. So let's say you are managing some company and you want to create a website for that company. And there are different type of logins, right? Let's say there is a CEO login, there is a manager login, there is a employee login, and end users login, right? Let's say I'm hosting a website. And there are, let's say for simplicity's sake, let's say there's a manager login and employee login. Even though it is hosted in the same site, let's say the company name is mycom. Even though the domain is mycom, the content which manager sees, he doesn't want his employees to see. Let's say you are having a portal to manage your year-end ratings and all those things, year-end appraisals. Manager decides when to release all those appraisals. He can see all those contents in a particular endpoint called /manager/appraisals. Whereas this particular endpoint in this mycom domain is not accessible to this employee. If you have logged in as an employee, if you hit this endpoint, you will most probably get this messages 401, you are unauthorized to access this. Whereas if you log in as a manager, you are authorized to enter into this endpoint and you are able to see the data which only manager is authorized to see. It's not authentication, it's authorization, right? That's a common difference. Right? So authentication is you're authenticated to enter into a website, but authorization is not every data that you are able to see or control. That's the difference. Okay? And all this authentication authorization has to be taken care in server. Again, because of this, server side programming is very, very important. You cannot handle all those things in the client side. That is the next thing. And okay, touching upon authentication authorization, what are the different authentication or authorization techniques that you might be aware of? I'll say you one. There's something called basic authentication, right? What is the basic? I think People, you would have touched upon this API request or whatever. What would have gone through this kind of an authentication mechanism? What's in basic authentication? Okay, someone says we can't hear you. I'm audible, right? Actually, okay. Yes. Login into website can be, yes, it's a basic authentication. Yes. In an API world, basic authentication is as simple as username and password, which in most of the times the base 64 encoded. I'll come to what's the basic 64 encoding in a while, but understand that basic authentication is just a username and password. What is the other type of authentication anyone is aware of? Yes, token based. Token based authentication, which is nothing but a token is generated for you. Token is a kind of a string which is usually 24 to 32 characters length, and once you provide that string in a request header, the server is going to process your request, read this API token, and understands whether this particular user is authenticated or not. That's a token-based authentication, and someone rightly posted something called OAuth. It is also true. OAuth. OAuth is nothing but many websites. If you would have seen, you would have seen this option like login with Google, login with Facebook. You can create your own login in that website, or you can just say login with Google account or Facebook account. It becomes much more simple. So how it is possible? If you want to, if you're creating one website, if you wanted to log in with the Google, you have to contact Google. You have to submit this request. Hey, I'm going to get into a partnership with you, so that I can authorize users to log in with Google, their Google accounts, and they'll give me something called a client ID and the client secret, which I will pass in every login with Google request. And they'll be that in turn Google will be sending me some basic details like your username and email, and I'll be storing that in my database going forward. Right? We are not going into deep how it is implemented and all. Just understand that it's a basic implementation. And someone was saying, yes, SSO, right? It's also a single sign-on kind of thing. Or yes, hash-based authentication. Yes, everything. So these are different authentication or authorization techniques that is available. Why it is needed? Because even though it is an HTTP request, we are just HTTPS request. We are just modulating or encoding a content only, but we are not going to verify whether the particular user is authorized or not in the HTTP request itself. Again, all these things are done in the server side only, authentication and authorization. So that is also another important thing in server side scripting, which we wanted to understand. And eighth, the most important thing is cookies. I hope many people would have seen this accept my cookies for a better experience and all those things. What is a cookie? I think it's the most used tech word in the tech industry. So why these things are important to know? Because we are going to see about Spring. Spring is what a server-side scripting language. A server-side scripting language has to handle all these things. It's not so better to understand this everything in a theoretical manner, then jump into what it is. So what is a cookie? Can anyone answer? Yes, client information is stored. Storing data on is absolutely correct. So what is a cookie? It is a small piece of information which is going to be stored at the client end. What's the client? Client is, in my case, it's a browser window, right? So when I say store in the client, that means what? Store in my computer. So when I say accept the cookie, it means what? You are accepting to make that website store all these informations in your computer. So understand that cookies are harmful to your computer in some ways, not many ways. Cookies are sometimes useful, but many times it is harmful also. So only the international community, this tech people have these standards to get the consent from the user before setting all these cookies. Right? Because of that only, every time you go to a website, it is actually mandated, even in Europe or US or in India. It's a law for the companies to ask you to accept all those cookies. Otherwise, it's not legal. So where these cookies are coming from, why cookies are used is, let's say again, Facebook or LinkedIn example only, you are logging into Facebook or LinkedIn. First time you are giving your username and password. But the second time, even when in this example, I have hit this Facebook website is directly loaded me my home page without me giving me the username and password. Why is that? What it is doing in the background? Can anyone say? I didn't give my username and password information again, right? Just using cookie. Right. So what it will do, it will store this cookie information, right, in your this username and password information or authentication information in the form of cookie. Because username and password is not directly stored in cookies. Instead, it is stored in a hashed form, in an encoded form, which is set in cookie. Now, this cookie has this expiration date also. Cookie is not set permanently in your client. It has some expiry date. So next time you log in, this cookie is read from the server and it knows this is a logged in user. I don't have to ask for username and password again. It is going to make me log in automatically. But what is the other purpose of cookie? Like it's a well-known purpose, right? You would have seen this um, whenever you go to this Amazon or Flipkart, you purchase something, and next minute those ads are going to be displayed in some other website which you visit. Right? How this is possible? Because those informations are set in cookie. This particular user, this particular IP has visited or this pages has clicked these particular links in Flipkart or Amazon. So it is natural for that to think that this person who is interested in all these things, so let us show him all these apps. So those things are taken from the cookie itself. Yes, to advertise. So the purpose of the server is also to handle the cookies, to authenticate, to serve proper ads targeting you. That's another purpose of cookie. Okay. Okay. So this initial 8 points are clear. Right? I hope there are not much confusion with this. So understand that this client is not doing all these things. Client is just storing these cookies, but all the validation is happening in the server end only. So only it's very, very important to have the server side system. Again, next thing which you wanted to understand is, let's say I'm having this data stored in a SQL server. Right? To insert, let's take this employee example itself. To insert any data into this kind of table, let's say same example, ID, name, and email. What will be the insert query? Can anyone say? Can anyone type? So generally, what's the SQL syntax for an insert? It goes something like someone said correctly. Yes, it's insert into table values. We'll pass all those values. So can anyone say me this client is a basic combination of HTML and CSS and JavaScript. Okay. Can someone say me, can we do all these insert query directly from the client itself, from the browser itself? Is it possible or not? Tushar was asking how we are going to save this session. It's automatically saved in the webinar dashboard. We'll be sharing with the links. It's not going to be a problem. Okay, for this question, Ram answers yes. Okay, let's assume that it is yes. So it is a right way of doing it. Can I fire a insert query directly from my client to a database? Is it the right way of doing it? Okay. Someone else, can you repeat the question? See, any SQL database, you have to, if you wanted to push the data into a SQL database, insert one more record or one more row, you have to say insert into this particular employee table values 1, ABC at gmail.com, right? Can I fire this insert query directly from the client? Is the question. Okay. Okay, it is no, because what happens if you directly fire something like that? If you go to the same Google website, you see this, there's something called JS section, right? If you see this, there are the requests are separated into different sections, etc., which I said use an Ajax calls or XML HTTP request, right? And this, what is JS then? JavaScript, right? CSS, images, right? Media. So whatever you are doing in the client, and everything is loaded, everything is available for you, right? Agree? This is a JS file which I'm able to see the source code itself. And that's the security. Right? See whatever Google has, I'm able to see here. Right? So next thing which you wanted to understand, whenever data comes to client, be it an HTML content, be it an JavaScript content, be it image or whatever, it is not secure because you are going to view that. Right? So firing data directly, firing insert query directly from a client is not possible. It is not encouraged, or it is not possible because of this. Because you are able to directly see all the code here. Yeah, for example, in this JavaScript statement, what if it is something like this? Right? If there's a line in line number 197 where it says insert into this particular database 1, ABC, ABC at gmail.com, it means what? The entire DB is exposed to you. Right? You're able to see what's the database name. You're able to see where it is hosted, what are the column names, what are the data available inside it. Is it the right way of doing that? Obviously, no, right? So because of all those things, those kind of validations are never happening in the client end. So it is always happening in the server end. So the DB hits is not possible directly via client like browser. Again, through, if I'm saying no, it's not possible via client, then how it is possible then? So how it is made possible then? I hope this because that is what I was talking for the past 1.5 hours. Right? It is possible through API request, which is coming from client to the server. Agree or not? Yes, someone was saying server side code, yes, but the server side code has to process some information which is coming from the client also. So because of that, client is sending this request in the form of XML or JSON, and in turn server process these requests and it's able to deliver it. That is what it is happening. So yes, I think yes, exactly. So I think some basic level of understanding regarding client server architecture we have come right until now. So before completing today's session, I also wanted to touch upon other two important things which I wanted to you to know regarding this client server architecture. So what is the need of the server side scripting? Why we need something like server side scripting? Can't this client handle all these things? Right? The answer to one of the answer to this question is because of the security which I was previously talking about. You will be able to see all of things directly. It is happening in the backend. Then what's the point of having all these secured things? Right? What are the other aspects can you think of? Yes, exactly. For fast processing speed, that answered. See, I was saying about this conversion of this tabular data into JSON format. Do you think JavaScript is going to execute all these things very fast in your client? We'll all get irritated if our internet connection is slow or even if our website is loads very, very slow. How it is optimized in very big companies, how it is not optimized in some government websites. You cannot expect everything to happen in the client end, right? Everything cannot happen in client side because that becomes too much heavy for the client to process and it will consume your RAM. Your entire browser will become slow. Boom, that's it, right? Nobody will like to view that web page anymore. So that is one important thing. And what are the other things can you think of? Memory, yes, memory is also kind of consideration which I was talking about. Memory, you cannot take too much memory there. And apart from that, how will you be able to cater all these information for so much users if everything is going to happen in single ending of time? Right? An application like Facebook or Instagram is going to be used by thousands of users at any given point of time in the particular area. Right? Those kind of heavy handling is going to be processed from the server side only, not from the client end. So there are many ways in which are, for me, when I was starting this development kind of things to understand this, it was a little difficult, but I'll try to explain in the simple terms. You're viewing a web page. There are many ways where how this web page is kind of rendered for you. This is the thing which we wanted to understand. A web page or a client or browser consists of what? Three basic elements, right? HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. What are the three things used for? Anyone has any idea? What is HTML used for? HTML is the structure of the particular web page, right? This particular text box is it should be a text box, it should be a button, it should come here. It's guided by the HTML. It's a structure. What is a CSS? CSS is a styling of the particular web page. It should be in this alignment, this format, this color, this graphics. Everything is taken care by CSS. Yes, Ram correctly said. JS is a logic part. I want my website to be functional, not static. There are two kind of websites you have to understand: a static website and a functional website. So when we say we are going to learn Spring, but we have to ask one first question initially to ourselves: why a Spring is even necessary? Right? I'm having a website, I'm having an HTML, CSS content, JavaScript content. I'm with all the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, I'll be able to create my own web page. With these three things only, it is possible without going to Spring itself. But why a Spring or backend framework is necessary in this case? For example, let's take this same example of the Google. Right? I can recreate this entire Google web page myself, even myself, by using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript itself, right? But this Google data is coming from server. Why it has to come from a server if I'm able to create the data myself? Yes, for some functional websites, Raj Gupta have answered correctly. For dynamic or functional website, we need a backend framework, right? There are two types of websites. One is static and dynamic. Static is what? For example, you are deciding to create your own page for your own resume. Right? That is static content, right? You will be creating an HTML and CSS and host in a static server. You'll be having this experience column in a separate div, your professional summary, your skill sets, or whatever. You can all create all these things as a static HTML content and host the static content in any server. And if you're going to hit the particular website, the static data is going to display for you. But what is a dynamic website is, yes, blog is static, exactly. Blog is what? A simple blog is static. For example, I don't want any kind of logging functionality, any kind of validation happening anywhere. I just wanted to display the content to you. Those websites are static websites. Have you heard of this famous website called Medium? Medium.com. It's a very, very famous blogging site across the international. If you find time, please go through this. Lot of very good tech contents are available in Medium actually. Okay? Very good tech contents across multiple communities are actually available in the Medium website. I'll show this Medium website. So one question I wanted to put forward is, say I'm able to see these blogs and all. I have logged in using my profile in this Medium. I'm clicking this article, it's displaying for me. So one question I'm putting forward is, this is static content, all right, but the Medium website is static website or dynamic website? Can anyone answer that? Two people says it's dynamic. Any other answers? Okay. Siva Shankar says it's static. Okay. The answer is dynamic. It's a dynamic website. But the question again, why it is dynamic? Why we call this as a dynamic? Why not static? Simple answer, it is dynamic because it's able to remember what I did last time. Because I have logged in through my profile, my data, my details are stored in the backend, my server is able to process the request, and it is able to deliver the content which I need. Right? For example, if I access my profile here in the Medium, right? I'm able to see my stories which I have written, I'm able to see the stats, I'm able to modify my profile, everything. How it is possible? It is not possible in the static website, right? Static website does not save my preference anywhere because there is no backend, there is no database. Whereas dynamic server, dynamic websites like Medium is able to save my preferences somewhere so that it's able to better serve me. Right? I'm able to log into that website. I'm able to save any articles or stories which I might like. I'm able to read it later on. I'm able to write my own story and publish it. I'm able to see the stats of my story, which I've already published, right? How these things are possible? Okay, I've posted the two things, right? I'm able to see the read ratio or whatever. So how these things are possible? Because it's a dynamic website, whatever content I written is stored somewhere in the database and it's served to me when I appropriately log in. Right? This is a typical example of a dynamic website. Okay. Now we're able to understand, right, what's the difference between a static and dynamic. Okay, someone says it can be accessed on any OS. Even a static content can be accessed in any machine, any OS, any device. That's not a thing. A dynamic content is something which data is preferences are saved in a database, and server is able to read all these preferences and serve right according to it. Facebook is a typical example of a dynamic website. A Google homepage. Okay, let's say Google homepage. Right, we have seen this example. Go to Google homepage. This Google homepage is a static website or dynamic website? Yes, Raj Gupta says all this logic reside in the server. Content is just a representation layer. Yes, absolutely correct. Is Wikipedia a static website? Yes, partially correct. I'll say why it is not static, the other half. So before going to that, this Google is a static website or not? Okay. So understand that this Google homepage is a static website actually, right? It doesn't have my anything to do with the logic that is coming from the backend. The static website which is served from the server, but it is also dynamic because understand that it is getting associated with my Google account here. You can see here. So what it basically does is like it is just loading the home page and it is just trying to find whether I have logged anything with my Google account or not. Understand that this entire content is static, but where this becoming dynamic because if I search something, the preferences are stored in my Google account. In that case, it becomes dynamic. It acts as a dynamic. Where in true sense, it's actually static website which doesn't have any code functionality that it actually does. But when I type something, let's say I'm searching for USD to INR conversion ratio, it is able to serve this particular data from the search engines, from the servers back to me in this particular usable format. Right? This entire content is delivered from the Google servers, but it doesn't have to remember my preference in the client end, but it anyway does so. Where it is showing, storing all this information, my past search results, it is storing in the client itself. Otherwise, it is going to sync all the search results with my Google account. If you search something here, right? The same thing if you open your Google, if you have Android device, if you're opening your browser, Chrome browser, if you click that Google search, it's going to display the same options for you. Right? How it's able to do so? Because the search results are synced. Someone was asking about this Wikipedia also. Wikipedia is also kind of similar behavior. Wikipedia content is a static content, but when it acts as a dynamic, the moment you are able to log into this Wikipedia and you are able to modify these results for yourself, you can edit the Wikipedia content, or anyone can go and edit, provided they have to approve and all those things are there. So it becomes dynamic content in that sense, right? You can directly edit this data, and you can the edited data is again going to be stored in the backend servers of Wikipedia. Right? In that sense, it's dynamic. Otherwise, this Google homepage is static. So we have to understand these differences while we are creating all these websites. Right? So why I'm saying all these things is like there are two important ways how a content is delivered from the server to client using something called MVC. This is a term which you will frequently hear while we are going through the Spring development technologies. What's an MVC? It's a model view controller. Right? M stands for model, V is view, and C is controller. See, whenever you are requesting for some websites, if content of the particular website itself is going to be generated completely from the server end, the whatever you see, the HTML content, CSS, JavaScript, whatever it is going to be completely coming from the backend technology or backend server. We call it as a MVC framework, modular controller framework. In this, view stands for, view is something which you view on the client. The actual content, the structure, the page that you view on the client is called a view. The model is a data that is going to be present inside that view. Right? See, I take the example of the same search result. The entire thing is a view, right? View is a kind of a structure like HTML. But this view has to be filled with some data. Right? The data is called a model. Right? And again, what kind of data it is going to be decided by this controller. Right? So understand that these are the three important segregations or components of an MVC. Model, view, control. View is what? The actual structure. Model is what? The data itself. And controller is what? What actual data that you are going to be see in this view and model. Right? That's a model, view, controller. If all the data is generated from the server end itself and given to you, then it is one type of representation of this data. One typical example of this everything server-side representation is JSP, right? Java Server Pages. Anyone have heard of this technology or this term called JSP? Anyone? Yes. So Java Server Pages. Yes. So what is a JSP? Why this nowadays its popularity is still there. There's many use cases. I will touch upon all those things while starting the actual core Spring framework. So understand that JSP is one such technology which generates all this HTML content, CSS or JavaScript or whatever into a particular template, and it's going to return back this template in the format called JSP. And this JSP is going to be rendered by your client browser like Chrome. Right? So that's the purpose of JSP. So this type of concept we call it as a, you have to understand, remember this term, templating. Right? Ultimately, what's a template? What's the meaning of a template? Template is a representation of something, right? Kind of a carbon copy or a blueprint of something. Right? Agree or no? So what is templating in a web development world? Templating is something you orchestrate all these HTML contents, CSS and JavaScript content together in a format called JSP and put it together everything and return it back to the client in a JSP format. And this browser is able to read this format, parse the data, show this content for you. This is called MVC form of generating your data. So one of the technologies JSP. There are many other technologies, and this concept is called templating. Okay. And what is the other way that you can generate the data through? And this is the most popular way, most demanding way nowadays, right? Through a second way called front-end frameworks. I think most of you have heard of these terms called Angular, Ember, React.js. Obviously, you would have heard of these terms, right? Or no, or is it new? Anyone heard of these terms? Okay, I'm not getting any answers. Yes, so few people have heard of these terms, right? So understand that there's a difference between this kind of JSP kind of templating kind of rendering your web page and Angular Ember React kind of generating your web page. The primary difference being in this templating kind of scenario, all the HTML content, CSS, JavaScript content is going to be generated from the server side itself. Server side is only your backend framework itself. Backend framework like Spring itself, and it is going to be sent back to the browser. Whereas in the another scenario, in front-end frameworks like Angular, Ember, and React, there will be a backend framework like Spring, but there is also a front-end framework like Angular JS or React JS, which is going to be responsible for your view alone, right? Understand that we saw these three things: the model, view, control. Model is what? Data. Controller is what kind of data. View is what? How we are going to view the data. Understand that these frameworks are representing of something called views alone, right? This model, which is a data, or the controller, which is what kind of data is actually okay. We'll come to this controller part. This model data is going to be primarily coming from the server only, right? Views is going to be coming from the client only. Model is going to be coming from the server only. This controller is a combination of both client and server. How? Because the client is only going to request what kind of data it wants, right? And server is going to process that request and send it back to the front-end framework for it to display in the views. Right? So this is the key difference. In the templating part, everything is in the server end, but in the front-end part, where it involves framework like Angular, Ember, and React.js, the view alone, how it is going to be rendered, what is the CSS or what is styling, everything is going to be taken care by the front-end framework. This model, nothing but the data is going to be taken care by the backend. This controller is combination of both front-end and backend. Right? This is the format which you'll most widely see in the current big tech companies like bank companies, like Amazon, Apple, Google, Netflix, whatever. Right? These are the two important technologies you have to remember of how a data is rendered from a server to a client. In this front-end frameworks kind of thing, all the HTML and CSS are going to be processed in a separate Angular framework, which is going to be run in a separate port on your server computer or in another server for that matter. And a backend server like Spring is going to be run in another server. How it's going to communicate this front end backend is through the API calls, right? The front end framework will be responsible for hitting the API calls to fetch this data from the server through controllers, and it is going to be load all this data into the view, and this particular browser is going to render this view for you. So that is the primary difference. Okay. Tushar was asking, can you elaborate? Could you please repeat? Okay, I'll repeat myself. The primary difference being all data, HTML, CSS, JS. Any website is combination of these three things only. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML is what, how the structure, CSS is what the styling, JavaScript is the functionality. If all the things are generated at the server side itself and it is sent back to the client, then it is called templating technology. Whereas if a front-end framework is also involved, and that is responsible for hitting this API request and fetching the data in a JSON or XML format, and this load this data into a HTML structure and render as a view to you for the browser to be displayed. Then it is another way of rendering website to your browser. I'll unmute everyone. Maybe if you have any questions, you can ask about the topics that we have seen today, or anything that you might want to discuss. Okay. I think I have unmuted all. So key things to remember or key takeaways from this section is there are different protocols through which the client and server communication takes place, and there is server which is serving your request alone, and there are CDNs to deliver your binary files like images and videos, and there is server itself which is going to communicate with your database via SQL or NoSQL database and fetch your information from the tabular formats and convert into a JSON or XML format through APIs. And we also saw what's an AJAX request, how it is being processed, what is authentication authorization, and what are different types, what is a cookie, how it's particularly useful, who validates that, and what is the use of this server-side scripting, and what are the views, different types of views of a web page. Any doubts until now? So I can assume no. What are we supposed to do tomorrow? I'll continue along the course, right? Spring is a huge thing to learn, especially for someone who is not from the development kind of world. There are many different unconventional things that you'll be learning, right, when you start this particular course. The things in the regular core Java thing which you might have not seen would have been are coming into this development kind of world. So you might be experiencing that. Apart from that, course will continue.
So
Okay.
how long this course will be, and it will start next week?
The courses, you can assume the courses already started. This demo session is kind of an introduction to the course that we're going to continue. Right?
Okay.
And in the upcoming days, we are going to cover the syllabus of what I have talked in the beginning of the session about Spring and the AOP and what is an MVC, and how we communicate with the database. Everything will be going to see in the detail, and we'll be creating our own app going forward in the coming weeks. Right? And someone was asking, yes, please.
So V2 Automation has a course detail or course recorded, so we can go through advance what you are going to take care next week, so we can better understand.
Yes, course syllabus is there. We will share. No, that's not a problem. And the recordings is always available. Everything is recorded, and we'll be sharing the links also. I think Rahul might be creating a WhatsApp group for the people, and we might be sharing those. Right? Okay. That's not a problem. And someone was asking like how this particular course is helpful for a tester. So I am a tester myself, right? For past 5 years, who have transformed into a development role recently by learning all these things in my company. So being in both world, I can say once you learn development, testing becomes much more simpler and easier, and you can get things very easily, which you will not get when you are only the testing world. You are testing UI, you are testing API, that's fine, but you will not get the complete picture unless you know the development itself. The complete picture, once you know development, you can feel that testing becomes much simpler and easier, and it's not going to be a matter at all for you in the future. It's going to be much useful, and you can, if you're a test engineer, you can crack interviews very easily once you are into a development. Where to use Spring Boot in testing? Okay, there are many answers to this. One way of looking at this, Spring Boot is first we have to understand, Spring Boot is a framework which is focused only on development of backend technology, server-side scripting, all that. But we have to understand, once you understand the Spring Boot code, let's say you are in a good product-based company where you get access to all these codes, right? What happens is, like, if you are testing an UI or API, if you know that what is happening in the backend, it is very easy to understand and test your functionality. Right? That is one way of looking at it. And the other way of looking at it is, like, some people develop their automation frameworks using Spring itself. Spring has a very powerful technology called dependency injection. I'll talk about, if I say what's a dependency injection, very confusing for you. It's a very powerful technology. Because of that, we are able to manage all our Java classes very easily. Some people use this Spring for creating testing framework also, but not extensive. That is one way of looking at it. And we can, if you are able to do white box testing by writing some JUnit cases, right? Understanding what the backend code does, what are the impact areas, testing becomes much more simpler and broader. That is the way we look at it. The course has started right away. It is going to be in a span of 8 to 10 weeks. And is Spring Boot useful for testers? Yes, absolutely. As I talked, I'm being tester myself. I'm able to absolutely confidently, I can say I'm more confident in testing because I know development. Okay, someone was saying if we are able to finish the session 10 to 15 minutes prior, we will be able to get ready for next session. I say absolutely, we'll make sure that in coming classes it is possible. Will it help in API testing? Yes, absolutely. API testing will become very breezy and smooth once you know what's development and all those things, because it primarily involves creating of an API. Before joining, we need to learn any basics. Basics of Java is necessary for Spring, because once you don't know basics of Java, then it becomes much difficult to understand any advanced concepts of Java. Right? The Spring uses all the advanced J2E, and basic Java is different, advanced Java is different. Spring Boot is going to use this advanced Java concepts. So knowing basic Java is much more helpful, and knowing some basic SQL databases is helpful. All right. So that is for today. If you have any questions, you can post it here. We'll be happy to answer. And there is one more demo session, also the continuation of today's session and the course itself tomorrow. So people can join. Right. Any other questions?
What is the real-time example for FTP?
I was saying you right. FTP is a kind of a storage area where you can store your binary files or any files for that matter. Generally, a file system is you are able to access all these. Example, you are able to download some PDF files or images. That is coming. It's coming from one of the implementations of this FTP protocol. Right? S3, as I said, Amazon Simple Storage Service is also one of the implementation of this FTP protocol. Because of that, you are able to get this binary data, raw data downloaded directly from that thing to your computer. That's the use of FTP. Right. Deepa says it's a great session. Thank you. We'll continue again. So we'll see you all with this. Thank you, Ahmad. We'll continue this tomorrow. We'll see much more in detail, and maybe we'll see a basic example of how a Spring works tomorrow in tomorrow's session. All right. Then shall we close today's session then? Thank you. I'm closing the today's session. Thank you for joining me.